Now, we've got to talk about Bluesky, the new left-wing Twitter alternative, a social media platform that many progressives have flocked to after abandoning Elon's Twitter because they hate him so much, because some absolutely unhinged stuff is going on over on that platform right now. They are targeting and harassing and threatening and trying to get banned from the site a mainstream liberal journalist and Kamala voter who dared to, at times, critically report on the science around transgender issues in a way that activists don't like. The reporter in question is Jesse Singal, the host of the Blacked Unreported podcast, which I actually guest hosted an episode of and am a huge fan of. And he's a smart, liberal, mainstream journalism guy who reports on trans issues and trans science in a way that is honest, right? It points out that there's no good data justifying this stuff for kids, the medical transitions, and very, very limited data for adults, and they hate him for it. They attack him viciously, and this isn't new, but he tried to join Bluesky because he, as a liberal, thinks Twitter has gotten too right-wing and doesn't want to be in an echo chamber, so he tried to join Bluesky, and all hell broke loose. So when Jesse first joined Bluesky, almost immediately he became the most blocked person on the website, which I find hilarious. Of course, second on the list was Brianna Wu, who had just hosted for an interview on this show, who is a moderate transgender Democrat. It's like they're blocking people from their own side. These are not right-wing people. These are not conservatives or Republicans. But they're mass blocking liberals who sometimes critique their own side in an interest of wanting to promote a better option. Again, so crazy. But that didn't bother me so much because part of free speech is having the ability to say what you think and express yourself, but also to block people and not listen to them. Like if someone blocks me, they're not violating my free speech. I'm still free to express myself online. They just have chosen not to listen. That's valid. That's their right. I think they're a little intolerant, a little close-minded, but you know what? Block away to your heart's desire. That doesn't bother me so much. What does bother me, though, is the insane change.org petition that the Bluesky progressives have been circulating with more than 25,000 signatures now, trying to get Jesse banned from the website because they don't like his reporting, and spreading some nasty lies about him in the process. This petition demands that Bluesky block Jesse and supposedly enforce its community guidelines, which they are incorrectly claiming he has violated. Many Bluesky users circulated the petition and indicated their support for banning Jesse by basically arguing that his presence on the website makes trans people unsafe somehow. For example, a left-wing account called The Surfs tweeted, "I'd rather every trans person on here feel safe than Jesse Singal feel like he's right." This, of course, makes no sense and is actually kind of condescending towards trans people, as if they're fragile infants who need to be coddled and sheltered from ideas or arguments or information that might not align with their viewpoints. That's not actually true, at least not the mentally stable ones. They don't need that because they're just like anybody else, and as adults can handle different viewpoints and different information. But also, like, what is this idea that anybody is entitled to feel safe and to censor others accordingly? Like, all right, what if I think The Surf's posts make me feel unsafe? Like, should he be blocked from the app? Like, it's just a totally unworkable and subjective standard that is inherently ridiculous. Plus, like we mentioned, they can block Jesse and they don't have to see his posts or his content. So how does him being allowed on the website make them unsafe? I like to try to justify or make sure I can articulate the arguments of the opposing side to make sure I'm not like caricaturing them or strawmanning them, and that I at least understand where they're coming from, even if I ultimately disagree. But with these people, the math is simply not mathing. There is no logic here. It's just raw emotion fueling a push for censorship against a mainstream journalist who does his job. And of course, to justify this, they are lying about him. They're saying incorrectly that he has published minors' medical records without their consent and violated people's privacy. None of this is true. He walks through it on his Substack. The most he's done is publish one sentence from a letter that was written in a patient's file about a trans kid because He reported on the testimony of a whistleblower from a clinic about how these kids were being mistreated and rushed through this process. And the whistleblower reported that one of the kids said they identified as a helicopter. Trans activists said this was a lie. So this whistleblower actually shared a letter, which he quoted a sentence from. There was no identifiable information published. No kid's privacy was violated. This is pretty standard reporting practice. This is not something that's beyond the pale or that he necessarily did incorrectly, and no children were harmed because of it. It's all just kind of hysterical nonsense. Now, I decided that I want to get in on the action, and I am going to be joining Bluesky and creating a profile and seeing how that goes over. Mostly because, you know what? I want to share my work so people see it, even if they disagree, and maybe they engage with it. Maybe I can change their mind, and I want to see what people across the spectrum have to say. And Twitter has become, I think its user base is still somewhat 50-50. I've seen some data, but the posts I see in my feed, at least, are very skewed to the right. Not a lot of progressive perspectives in there. So I want to know what everyone's saying. So I'm joining Bluesky. We'll see if they stay strong. So far, the company has clarified that they're not going to ban Jesse, despite this tremendous pressure to do so. He is the #1 most blocked person. Who knows? Maybe I'll make that list. Probably not important or notable enough for that to happen, but we'll see. The other thing, too, is that part of the reason they hate people like Jesse with such a fervor is because he's one of them that pushes back and critiques. Like, he is a liberal. He is a Democrat. He's part of the mainstream media. And yet he criticizes their extreme activism. He pushes back on it. He fact checks them. He reports honestly about research that undercuts alphabet people's agenda. All of this, and they hate that. That's what really bothers them, I think, is when someone from their own side steps in it. Whereas if there's somebody who they perceive as like right-wing or far-right, like me, even though I'm not, but even though when they perceive someone like that, it doesn't seem to inspire the same level of unhinged psychopathy and hatred and derangement that it does when one of their own crosses the line or aligns with the enemy or prints inconvenient information or does all of these things that they somehow view as so heinous when a journalist does them. To me, this story was really interesting on a couple different levels, but one, just because it shows you where all the crazy people who used to be on Twitter and used to dominate that platform, where they've all gone. It's obvious. It's Bluesky. And it shows you the perils of an echo chamber, right? When you have a space that's just all left-wing people, totally out of touch, even a very liberal, pro-Kamala voter, like person like that is somehow viewed beyond the pale. And what you're doing then, if you consign yourself to a space like that, is you're going to totally lose touch with the public and public opinion. You're not going to see any information that contradicts your worldview, and you're just going to become more extreme and toxic in your own little bubble and then never actually achieve anything because you're going to be totally out of touch with the real world and the American public. So good luck on that front. And the other thing about this that bothered me was the way that many media outlets like this technology news website TechCrunch reported on it and basically just like perpetuated and parroted a bunch of lies about Jesse and the narrative that he's like anti-trans. He's not. He doesn't even support laws restricting access to transitions for minors. He's just a journalist who truthfully reports on information and research. And just parroted this activist framing. They didn't even reach out to him for comment before the article's publication, I don't think. Or he could have told them that many of the things they were going to say aren't true. It's just like very shoddy journalism that shows you again how the media kind of is used and weaponized by these left-wing activists to attack people who speak out against these dogmas. And just on the trans issue in particular, it's just part and parcel of a long trend of intense and often unhinged hostility towards people who criticize the narrative or break with it in any way that unfortunately is kind of par for the course, but is really tragic in many ways because it's not what's in the best interest of actual gender-confused youth or transgender people who actually benefit from truthful, honest conversations and investigation into what the research says, what is and isn't justified by the studies. But instead, these activists just want to harass and bully people into shutting up or get them silenced and censored if they won't go away of their own accord. And I, for one, am glad that at least so far, in the case of Jesse Singal, that approach, that censorious and toxic approach, isn't working. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments, and do hit that like button while you're at it.